Thomas Anderson sat quietly in his small apartment, carefully polishing a worn silver medal that had belonged to his father. The Royal Service medal gleamed under the lamplight, its surface reflecting memories of a man he had lost too early, but whose legacy burned brightly in his heart. His father, Captain William Anderson, had served as a Royal Palace Guard for 23 years before a heart attack claimed his life when Thomas was only 16. The medal was all Thomas had left of his father's distinguished career, along with faded photographs and stories his mother still shared on quiet evenings. William Anderson had been respected among his peers, known for his unwavering dedication, impeccable discipline, and genuine care for both the royal family and his fellow guards. Thomas had grown up hearing tales of state ceremonies, visiting dignitaries, and the profound honor of protecting the nation's most important symbols. Now, 24, Thomas worked at a local factory, assembling car parts on an endless production line. The work was honest but unfulfilling, each day blending into the next without purpose or meaning. His colleagues were decent people, but none understood the fire that burned within him or the dreams that kept him awake at night. Thomas yearned for something greater, something that would make his father proud and give meaning to the sacrifice William had made for his country. Every morning before work, Thomas performed the fitness routine his father had taught him as a child: push-ups, sit-ups, running through the neighborhood streets as the sun rose over the city. His neighbors thought him eccentric, but Thomas knew these exercises were preparation for a destiny he had been working toward his entire life. His body was strong, his mind was focused, and his heart carried the unshakable conviction that he was meant to follow in his father's footsteps. The Royal Palace. Guard recruitment process opened only once every 3 years, and applications were notoriously difficult to obtain. Thousands of young men and women applied for perhaps 20 positions, and the selection process was rigorous beyond imagination. Physical fitness was only the beginning. Candidates needed perfect health records, impeccable backgrounds, exceptional references, and the kind of mental fortitude that could withstand months of intensive training. Thomas had been preparing for this opportunity. Since his 18th birthday, he had maintained perfect health, avoided any legal troubles, volunteered in his community, and saved every penny for the training period when regular income would be impossible. His mother, Sarah Anderson, watched his dedication with a mixture of pride and worry. She had already lost her husband to service, and the thought of her son facing similar risks filled her with dread. But Sarah also understood that Thomas carried something special within him, the same sense of duty and honor that had defined his father. She had seen it in his eyes since childhood, the way he stood straighter when he saw palace guards on television, the reverence with which he handled his father's old uniform pieces, and the quiet determination that had guided every decision he made throughout his young life. The recruitment announcement finally arrived in the local newspaper on a Tuesday morning in March. Thomas read the requirements carefully, his heart racing as he realized he met every qualification. The application period would last only 2 weeks, and interviews would begin immediately afterward. This was the moment he had been preparing for his entire adult life. The chance to honor his father's memory and fulfill his own deepest calling. Thomas requested time off from the factory, knowing that his supervisor would be unsympathetic to what seemed like an impossible dream. His co-workers wished him luck, though most believed he was setting himself up for disappointment. The competition would be fierce, so Thomas came from humble circumstances without the connections or advantages that many other candidates would possess. That evening, Thomas sat with his mother at their small kitchen table, filling out the application with meticulous care. Each question seemed designed to probe not just his qualifications, but his character and motivations. Sarah helped, where she could, sharing details about William's service that Thomas might not remember clearly. Together, they crafted responses that were honest, heartfelt, and demonstrated the depth of Thomas's commitment. As Thomas sealed the completed application in its envelope, he felt the weight of his father's expectations and his own dreams converging into this single moment. The medal sat on the table beside him, catching the kitchen light and seeming to offer its silent blessing. Tomorrow, he would submit his application and begin the most important journey of his life, carrying forward a legacy that had shaped him since childhood and pursuing a dream that had sustained him through years of preparation and hope. The recruitment office buzzed with nervous energy as dozens of hopeful candidates waited their turn for initial screening. Thomas arrived an hour early, dressed in his best suit and carrying the confidence that came from years of preparation. Around him sat young men and women from all walks of life, each harboring their own dreams of serving at the royal palace. Some appeared confident, others visibly anxious, but all shared the same determination that had brought Thomas to this moment. The initial interview lasted 30 minutes and covered everything from Thomas's educational background to his motivations for seeking this position. The recruitment officer, a stern woman in her 50s with military bearing, asked probing questions about his father's service and whether Thomas understood the difference between honoring a legacy and living up to impossible expectations. Thomas answered honestly, explaining that he sought not to replace his father, but to forge his own path of service guided by the values William had instilled in him. Physical fitness testing began the following week at a military training facility outside the city. Thomas joined 47 other candidates who had passed the initial screening, a diverse group that included former soldiers, athletes, security professionals, and civilians like himself who simply felt called to serve. The tests were demanding. Timed runs, obstacle courses, strength assessments, and endurance challenges that pushed every candidate to their limits. Thomas excelled in the physical challenges, his years of disciplined training evident in every exercise. But he also noticed that raw fitness was only part of what the evaluators sought. They watched how candidates encouraged struggling teammates, handled frustration when tests didn't go well, and maintained composure under pressure. These observations reminded Thomas of his father's teachings about character being more important than capability. The psychological evaluation process proved more challenging than any physical test. Thomas spent hours with military psychologists who probed his motivations, fears, and mental resilience. They presented hypothetical scenarios involving threats to the royal family, conflicts with superiors, and situations where personal beliefs might clash with duty requirements. The evaluators seemed particularly interested in how Thomas would handle the pressure of living up to his father's reputation. During one particularly intense session, a psychologist asked Thomas what he would do if ordered to take an action that contradicted something his father had taught him. The question struck deep, forcing Thomas to articulate the difference between blind obedience and principled service. He explained that his father had taught him to think independently while serving faithfully, to question orders privately when necessary, but to execute them professionally once given. Background: investigations consumed several weeks as investigators interviewed everyone Thomas had ever known. His former teachers, employers, neighbors, and friends all faced detailed questions about his character, reliability, and suitability for protecting the nation's most important family. Thomas worried that his humble background might work against him, but investigators seemed impressed by the consistent picture of integrity and dedication that emerged from every interview. His mother Sarah endured her own lengthy interview, during which investigators explored the family's financial situation, political beliefs, and personal history. She spoke proudly about Thomas's character and dedication, while also expressing her concerns about the dangers he might face. The investigators appreciated her honesty, noting that families who understood the risks often produced the most reliable guards. 20-8 candidates remained after the background checks were completed. Thomas felt both pride and anxiety knowing he had survived another elimination round, but the competition was becoming increasingly intense. The remaining candidates were all exceptional individuals with impressive qualifications and strong motivations for service. Standing out in this group would require something beyond physical fitness and clean background checks. The academic phase of selection tested candidates' knowledge of history, protocol, current events, and crisis management. Thomas spent evenings studying materials his father had saved from his own training, supplementing them with contemporary resources about modern security threats and royal procedures. His factory co-workers thought he had lost his mind, spending every spare moment reading about subjects that seemed to have no practical application to their daily lives. Final interviews are conducted by senior palace officials who would ultimately make selection decisions. Thomas found himself face to face with men and women who had known his father professionally, creating both opportunities and pressure he hadn't anticipated. Some remembered William Anderson fondly and were curious to see what qualities Thomas had inherited. Others seemed determined to evaluate him independently. Without reference to family connections, the waiting period after final interviews felt endless. Thomas returned to his factory job, but his heart and mind remained focused on the selection process. His supervisor had grown tired of his distraction and frequent absences, warning that his position might not be available much longer. Thomas faced the possibility that he might lose his current job without gaining the position he truly wanted, leaving him unemployed and directionless for the first time in his adult life. The official letter arrived on a Thursday morning in late June, bearing the royal seal that made Thomas's hands tremble as he opened the envelope. His mother stood beside him in their small kitchen, both barely breathing, as Thomas unfolded the heavy paper. The formal language took a moment to process, but the meaning became clear. Thomas Anderson had been selected for Royal Palace Guard training. One of only 12 candidates chosen from the original pool of hundreds, Sarah burst into tears, a mixture of overwhelming pride and deep fear washing over her. She had dreamed of this moment since Thomas first expressed his desire to follow his father's path. But the reality brought back memories of William's dangerous service and the risks their family had faced. Thomas held the letter with shaking hands, reading it again and again to convince himself that his lifelong dream was finally becoming reality. Training would begin in 3 weeks at the Royal Military Academy, an intensive 6-month program that would transform selected civilians into elite protective specialists. The letter included detailed instructions about what to bring, what to expect, and stern warnings about the physical and mental challenges ahead. Only half of those beginning training typically completed the program successfully, meaning Thomas's acceptance was just the first step in a much longer journey. Thomas quit his factory job immediately, despite his mother's concerns about financial security. Savings would cover basic expenses during training, and successful completion would guarantee employment with excellent benefits. More importantly, every fiber of his being knew that this opportunity was worth any risk. He had been preparing for this moment his entire adult life, and nothing would prevent him from giving everything he had to succeed. The Royal Military Academy stood imposing against the countryside landscape, its ancient stone buildings radiating authority and tradition. Thomas arrived with his single suitcase and burning determination. Joining 11 other recruits who had survived the same rigorous selection process, they came from diverse backgrounds: former military personnel, university graduates, athletes, and working-class individuals like Thomas, who had earned their places through sheer dedication and character. Their training sergeant, Master Sergeant Collins, had served as a palace guard for 15 years before transitioning to instructor duties. He made it clear from the first day that their previous accomplishments meant nothing here, and that only sustained excellence over the next 6 months would earn them the privilege of wearing the palace guard uniform. The training would break them down completely before building them back up as elite protectors worthy of their responsibilities. Physical training pushed every recruit beyond their previous limits. Dawn runs became longer and faster each week. Obstacle courses grew more complex. And combat training introduced techniques for protecting others rather than simply defending oneself. Thomas excelled in most physical challenges, his years of preparation evident. But he also learned that natural ability meant nothing without the discipline to improve constantly and the humility to learn from mistakes. Classroom instruction covered everything from royal protocol to threat assessment, from first aid to international relations. Thomas discovered that modern palace guards needed far more than physical prowess. They required deep knowledge of politics, psychology, technology, and diplomacy. The complexity of their future responsibilities was both intimidating and inspiring. Revealing the true scope of the role he aspired to fill, weapons training introduced Thomas to firearms, defensive tactics, and emergency procedures that could mean the difference between life and death in crisis situations. The instructors emphasized that palace guards hoped never to use these skills in real situations, but they must be prepared to act decisively and accurately if threats materialized. Thomas thought often of his father during these sessions, wondering what situations William had faced and how his own training compared. The psychological pressure of training proved as challenging as any physical exercise. Instructors created high-stress scenarios designed to test decision-making under pressure, emotional control during provocations, and the ability to maintain professional bearing in uncomfortable situations. Several recruits struggled with these challenges, their frustration visible as they found their mental limits tested alongside their physical capabilities. Thomas formed close bonds with his fellow recruits, particularly Marcus Webb, a former university student whose analytical mind complemented Thomas's instinctive understanding of duty and service. They pushed each other through difficult training phases, shared encouragement during moments of doubt, and developed the kind of mutual trust that would be essential in their future roles, protecting others. Halfway through training, 3 recruits were dismissed for various failures to meet standards. The departures served as sobering reminders that selection for training guaranteed nothing, and that sustained excellence was required until the final day. Thomas felt sympathy for those who left, knowing how much they had sacrificed for this opportunity. But their departures also strengthened his resolve to succeed where others had fallen short. Personal visits from family were forbidden during training, but letters provided crucial emotional support during the most challenging phases. Sarah wrote weekly, sharing neighborhood news and expressing her pride in Thomas's progress. These letters reminded him that his success would honor not only his father's memory, but also his mother's sacrifices and support throughout his journey toward this goal. As autumn arrived at the academy, Thomas and his fellow recruits faced their most challenging phase of training. Advanced protective scenarios required them to work as cohesive teams while maintaining individual excellence. Assassination attempts, crowd control situations, and emergency evacuations tested everything they had learned during the previous months. The margin for error had disappeared completely, and any significant mistake could result in immediate dismissal from the program. Thomas excelled in team leadership exercises, his natural instincts for protecting others emerging clearly during crisis simulations. Instructors noted his ability to remain calm under extreme pressure, while making sound tactical decisions that prioritized the safety of those under his protection. These qualities reminded veteran guards of his father's reputation for steady reliability during the most stressful situations they had faced together. The royal protocol training intensified as recruits prepared for actual palace duties. They learned the intricate ceremonies surrounding state visits, the complex hierarchy of court officials, and the subtle communication systems that allowed guards to coordinate without disrupting formal proceedings. Thomas absorbed these lessons eagerly, understanding that mastering protocol was as important as physical readiness for success in his chosen career. During week 20 of training, recruits received their first assignment to shadow active palace guards during routine duties. Thomas was paired with Sergeant Major Harrison, 20-year veteran who had served alongside William Anderson during the final years of his father's career. Harrison remembered William fondly and was curious to evaluate how Thomas compared to his father's example of dedicated service, standing in the palace corridors for the first time. Thomas felt the weight of history and tradition surrounding him. The ornate walls held portraits of monarchs stretching back centuries, each protected by generations of dedicated guards who had sacrificed personal comfort for the honor of service. Thomas understood that he was seeking to join an ancient brotherhood, bound together by shared commitment to something greater than individual ambition. Sergeant Major Harrison observed Thomas carefully during their shifts together, noting his alertness, professionalism, and genuine respect for the responsibility they shared. After several days of evaluation, Harrison shared memories of William Anderson, describing him as a guard who never sought glory, but could be counted upon absolutely when duty called. The comparison was both inspiring and challenging for Thomas, who wanted to honor his father's memory without being forever defined by it. The palace staff gradually accepted Thomas's presence during his training rotations. Kitchen workers, administrative personnel, maintenance crews all played crucial roles in palace operations. And successful guards needed to work cooperatively with everyone who contributed to the royal household's functioning. Thomas's humble background helped him connect naturally with staff members, who appreciated his genuine respect for their expertise and contributions. Advanced firearms training introduced Thomas to the specialized weapons and tactics used by palace guards. Unlike military or police work, palace security required absolute precision and the ability to neutralize threats, without endangering innocent bystanders or damaging priceless historical artifacts. The psychological pressure of knowing that mistakes could have catastrophic consequences pushed every recruit to achieve unprecedented levels of accuracy and control. Thomas's marksmanship scores consistently ranked among the top 3 in his training class, but instructors emphasized that technical skill alone was insufficient. They needed guards who could make split-second decisions about when to use force, how much force was appropriate, and whether alternative approaches might resolve situations more effectively. These judgment calls required maturity and wisdom. That came only through experience and careful mentoring by veteran guards. Personal development sessions forced recruits to examine their motivations and mental resilience honestly. Thomas confronted his fears about living up to his father's reputation, his anxiety about protecting people whose lives were far more valuable than his own, and his concerns about the impact his dangerous career might have on his mother's peace of mind. These conversations with counselors and chaplains helped him develop the emotional stability essential for long-term success. The final month of training focused on real-world application of everything they had learned. Recruits rotated through different palace security positions, worked actual shifts protecting minor royal events, and faced unannounced evaluations that tested their readiness for independent responsibility. Thomas approached each assignment with the seriousness of a final examination, knowing that any significant failure could end his journey just steps away from his ultimate goal. 2 more recruits were dismissed during this final phase, unable to handle the pressure of real responsibility after succeeding in training exercises. Their departures reminded the remaining 7 that completion of training was never guaranteed until the final ceremony. Thomas felt increasing confidence in his abilities while maintaining the humility and vigilance that had carried him this far in the process. As graduation approached, Thomas received permission for his first family visit since training began. Sarah arrived at the academy proud but nervous, barely recognizing her son in his crisp uniform and confident bearing. 6 months of intensive training had transformed Thomas physically and mentally, giving him the presence and capabilities necessary for his chosen profession while deepening the character traits that had always defined him. Graduation day arrived with crisp December air and the kind of formal ceremony that befitted the conclusion of such rigorous training. 7 recruits stood at attention in the academy's main hall, having survived 6 months of physical, mental, and emotional challenges that had eliminated nearly half of their original group. Thomas felt his father's presence strongly as he prepared to take the oath that William had spoken 24 years earlier in this same historic room. The ceremony began with a review of their training accomplishments and recognition of the sacrifices made by recruits and their families. Sarah Anderson sat in the front row of the small audience, tears streaming down her face as she watched her son achieve the dream that had sustained him through years of preparation. She thought of William often during the ceremony, wishing he could witness this moment of triumph and continuation of his legacy. The oath of service carried profound weight, as each new guard pledged to protect the royal family with their lives, to maintain absolute confidentiality about palace affairs, and to uphold the highest standards of personal and professional conduct. Thomas spoke the words with complete sincerity, understanding that he was making commitments that would define every aspect of his future life and career. Senior palace officials presented each graduate with their official credentials and preliminary assignments. Thomas learned he would begin his career in the outer perimeter security detail, working with experienced guards who would continue his practical education while he gained real-world experience. The assignment was exactly what he had hoped for. providing opportunities to prove himself while learning from veterans who understood the complexities of palace protection. The graduation celebration that evening brought together new guards, their families, academy staff, and veteran guards who served as mentors and role models. Thomas met many guards who had served with his father, each sharing memories that helped him understand William's reputation and the standard of excellence he had maintained throughout his career. These conversations reinforced Thomas's determination to honor his father's memory through his own dedicated service. Master Sergeant Collins pulled Thomas aside during the celebration to offer personal congratulations and advice for his upcoming career. Collins had trained hundreds of recruits during his years as an instructor, and he recognized something special in Thomas's combination of natural ability, dedicated preparation, and genuine commitment to service. He predicted that Thomas would have opportunities for advancement and increased responsibilities if he maintained the standards he had demonstrated during training. The following Monday, Thomas reported for his first official duty as a Royal Palace Guard. His crisp new uniform felt both familiar and foreign as he joined the morning briefing with his assigned team. Sergeant Williams, a 12-year veteran, would serve as his immediate supervisor and primary mentor during his probationary period. Williams had worked with William Anderson and was eager to evaluate how the son compared to his father's example. Thomas's first assignment involved monitoring the palace's outer gates, checking identification of authorized personnel, and observing pedestrian traffic for potential security concerns. The work required constant alertness and professional interaction with palace staff, government officials, and approved visitors. Thomas approached each interaction with courtesy and vigilance, understanding that every person he encountered was evaluating his competence and suitability for his position. The routine of palace security proved both demanding and rewarding. 12-hour shifts required physical stamina and mental focus that tested everything Thomas had learned during training. But the work also provided the sense of purpose and meaningful contribution he had sought his entire adult life. Protecting the royal family felt like participating in something far greater than individual ambition or personal success. Within his first month of service, Thomas encountered his first serious security situation. A disturbed individual attempted to climb the palace fence during a shift change, requiring coordinated response from multiple guards. Thomas followed protocol perfectly, maintaining his assigned position while communicating effectively with teammates who neutralized the threat. His calm professionalism during this incident impressed supervisors and established his reputation as a reliable team member. Palace staff gradually accepted Thomas as part of the extended royal household family. Kitchen workers greeted him warmly. During meal breaks, administrative personnel appreciated his respectful demeanor, and maintenance crews valued his willingness to assist with security-related concerns. These relationships reminded Thomas that effective palace protection required cooperation from everyone who contributed to the royal family's safety and comfort. Advanced training continued even after graduation, with specialized courses in new technologies, evolving threats, and changing protocols. Thomas embraced these learning opportunities eagerly, understanding that complacency could compromise his effectiveness and endanger those he had sworn to protect. His enthusiasm for continuous improvement reflected the same dedication to excellence that had defined his father's career. Letters from his mother provided emotional support and connection to life beyond palace walls. Sarah had returned to her normal routines, but she followed Thomas's career with intense pride and some anxiety. She understood the dangers inherent in his chosen profession, while recognizing that he had found his true calling and was thriving in the demanding environment of palace security. As winter turned to spring, Thomas settled into the rhythm of palace life. Each shift brought new challenges and opportunities to demonstrate his competence and reliability. He had successfully transitioned from dreaming about following his father's footsteps to actually walking the same corridors William had protected, carrying forward a legacy of service while establishing his own reputation for excellence and dedication. 6 months into his palace guard career, Thomas faced his most significant test yet. Intelligence reports indicated a credible threat against the royal family during an upcoming state dinner, requiring heightened security measures and careful coordination among all protective personnel. Thomas was assigned to an inner perimeter position, responsibility typically reserved for more experienced guards, demonstrating the confidence his supervisors had developed in his abilities. State dinner brought together diplomatic officials, government ministers, and international dignitaries in the palace's most formal setting. Thomas positioned himself strategically where he could observe both the guests and potential approach routes that might be used by anyone with hostile intentions. His training in threat assessment and crowd psychology proved invaluable as he monitored the complex social dynamics of high-level diplomatic gathering. During the dinner's second course, Thomas noticed a server behaving unusually, making eye contact with someone in the crowd and deviating from standard service protocols. His observation skills, honed through months of training and practical experience, detected subtle signs that something was wrong. Thomas communicated his concerns to his team leader through discreet hand signals, initiating a coordinated response that investigated the situation without disrupting the formal proceedings. The investigation revealed that the server was indeed involved in a plot to embarrass rather than harm the royal family. But the incident validated Thomas's alertness and professional judgment. Senior security officials praised his observation skills and measured response, noting that he had identified a genuine threat while avoiding the overreaction that could have created unnecessary panic among innocent guests. Following the successful handling of this security situation, Thomas received his first commendation and was recommended for advancement to a more responsible position within the palace guard structure. The recognition meant validation of his competence and dedication. But more importantly, it proved that he had successfully established himself as a capable guard. Independent of his father's reputation, Thomas was promoted to the inner palace detail, working directly with the royal family's personal protection team. This assignment required security clearance for access to the most sensitive areas of the palace and detailed knowledge of the royal family's daily routines, travel plans, and security preferences. The position represented both a significant career advancement and increased responsibility for protecting the nation's most important family, working closely with the royal family provided Thomas with insights into their humanity that balanced his professional respect with personal affection. He discovered that behind their public roles and ceremonial duties, they were genuinely caring people who appreciated the sacrifices made by those who protected them. Their recognition of his service and dedication meant more to Thomas than any official commendation or career advancement. During a private moment, the Queen Mother asked Thomas about his father's service, having remembered William Anderson's dedication during her earlier years. She spoke warmly of William's reliability and discretion, noting that the best guards were those who understood their role as protectors rather than servants. Her personal recognition of his father's legacy and acknowledgement of Thomas's own growing reputation created a profound sense of completion and continuity. Thomas's mother, Sarah, visited the palace for the first time during a special recognition ceremony honoring guards and their families. Seeing her son in his dress uniform, confident and respected among his peers, she finally understood that his childhood dream had become a meaningful reality. The ceremony included a moment of recognition for guards' families, acknowledging the sacrifices made by loved ones who support those serving in dangerous professions. As Thomas's second year of service began, he was selected for specialized training in international security cooperation, preparing him for assignments involving foreign dignitaries and overseas royal visits. This advanced training represented recognition of his exceptional performance and potential for increased responsibility within the elite ranks of palace security personnel. The specialized training took Thomas to facilities around the world, learning from security professionals who protected other heads of state and international figures. These experiences broadened his understanding of global security challenges while reinforcing his pride in the British palace guard tradition and the high standards maintained by his colleagues. Returning from international training, Thomas was assigned as a team leader for newer guards beginning their palace careers. Teaching and mentoring recent graduates reminded him of his own early struggles and the importance of experienced guards who had guided his development. He approached this responsibility with the same dedication his own mentors had shown, understanding that developing future guards was as important as protecting current royalty. On the second anniversary of his graduation from the academy, Thomas stood in the same palace corridor where he had first met Sergeant Major Harrison. He carried his father's medal in his uniform pocket, no longer as a reminder of dreams deferred, but as a symbol of legacy fulfilled and honor continued. William Anderson's son had not only followed in his father's footsteps, but had begun creating his own path of distinguished service. Thomas had achieved his lifelong dream of becoming a royal palace guard. But more importantly, he had discovered that the dream was only the beginning of a career dedicated to service, protection, and the continuation of values that transcended individual ambition. His father's story lived on in Thomas's heart. But Thomas was now writing his own chapter in the long history of those who stand guard over the symbols and people that represent the best of their nation. The young man who had once polished his father's medal in a small apartment had become a respected professional, whose own example would inspire future generations of guards, carrying forward a legacy of honor, duty, and selfless service that connected past, present, and future in an unbroken chain of dedication to something greater than themselves.